Tuesday, the 13th of January, 2026. And this morning, just because I've missed so many different videos, I'm probably going to be all over the place. But I was hosting people at the house Thursday onwards up until yesterday. And so I was doing a lot of research and assessments. I've posted several of them on LinkedIn and Facebook and other social media platforms like X. And so just pertaining to kind of like things that have going on in my head based on some significant and major events that have been happening worldwide. So I did the assessment on Mark Carney. I've done the assessment on, my goodness, CBC and LNG, on so many other things. But in the last 48, I've also done a new assessment, and it's going to be comparing Israel versus Canada regarding who could or should be the strongest ally to the USA, barring what's going on currently with the Canadian government and how they are destabilizing our relationship at home and abroad, and our reputation, and risking us being removed from the Five Eyes community, and so many other things. But before I get into that, I'm obviously following multiple different social media influencers that are in the what we call the truther community, people that are exposing a lot of information that's getting censored or not being reported by leftist and or mainstream legacy media or elected officials or politicians or academia. And there are people fairly new within the network, and even people that I've done podcasts before with, and so I respect and admire these people. They have way more followers than me, so clearly they're doing a lot more right than I am. However, it has to do with the information, and I'm never going to sell out and give information that is sensationalized or conspiratorial, that's not based on truth or facts, and or outright wrong and propaganda, and use that as a way to get clicks. And so there are people that are misreporting on the ICE officer, the ICE agent, Jonathan Ross, and making alleged claims that he was connected to and or trained with the IDF and or Israel. And this could be correct, but there's been no proof provided. And again, that's where I've tried to look for my own proof. Again, I've been doing a lot of other research, and again, hosting people at my home for the complete weekend, like from Thursday onwards up until yesterday. And so I haven't looked too much into it. So if anyone's watching and has any proof, any actual proof that Jonathan Ross was training with the IDF and or served with the IDF, please let me know. And that does that matter? At this point, there could be considerations to look into as to their practices and the training and the scope of their training, etc., and seeing if that aligns with American and Canadian responses for things like crowd control or arresting or detaining people, etc. And so it's unfortunate. And so I've tried to reach out to certain people that I either have done podcasts with, and really, again, I'm going to say respect, but there's a few things that have been shared, and they're outright wrong. Sometimes it's walked back, and sometimes it's not, and it's just unfortunate, because again, I don't think it helps when we push misinformation. And I was looking into a few podcasts, so the World War debate, briefly looking into that, like the different debaters on, and again, this is where the conversation regarding Israel came up with the U.S. and them claiming to be like the superior country to be aligned with, because they are, again, even they claiming to be superior to even the U.S., which is, again, I did an assessment on that, and so I'll get into that in a bit. But and then just the debate with I think her name was Anna and Pearl, and yeah, I'm kind of in the middle of that debate, and so I would love to debate feminism and traditional conservative values, and where like the woman stays at home and all that stuff. I would love to debate that. I've done so many videos on that, and so there is a link where you can get in the ring, is what they call it. And so I have to fill out a lot of information if I want to apply to be part of like the next round of debates. And so, but will I get accepted? I don't know, because again, there's just so many more influential debaters and podcasters and people within academia within the U.S. So I would assume that they would likely pivot towards like more American debaters and not international or Canadian. And but anyway, I just wanted to get a few things out of the way that I don't have posted on my social media anymore. Because even though I haven't been doing videos, I have been posting things on my Instagram, my X accounts, my LinkedIn, etc. Um, yeah, and so I was again look briefly at Tim Pool and his assessment of what happened a few days ago and the death of Renee Nicole Good and Jonathan Ross and Tim Pool. You know, he believes that he shouldn't have shot her. I believe was kind of I didn't watch the whole thing, but that's the same impression I got in the parts that I was watching. And there's other people saying the same thing, but I do want to say respectfully, if you've never had your life at risk or in danger, if you've never been in the field or if you've never been in war, you don't have like the same level of experience and knowledge, respectfully speaking, to speak on that in such a like committed way. Like he has such a huge influence, and again, this is very divisive, and it doesn't help. And again, there's more factors. So when people kind of come at this as if they're the experts or they know better or they would do better in the situation, that's where we kind of go into murky waters. And again, people can interpret that in many different ways. And anyways, that's just how I interpret it. And again, if you don't have that experience and knowledge where your life has been at risk or people that you love, then respectfully speaking, maybe be just a little bit less bias and or stay in your lane. Anyway, and then that's not censorship. That's just my own observations and my comment on that. Which is probably why Tim Pool would never invite me on his show, because there's been several videos where I've said good things about him and I've shared good information that he's provided, and that really makes sense and that I really support. But I've also showed where I think he's completely off and exaggerating and or lying. And so, yeah, I doubt that he'd have me on in case like he would suspect or assume that I would be calling that out, which I would be. So he's right. And okay, so I think that's it for now. Michael Ma going to China with Carney. I've talked about that, and again, like this is likely his reward for being a sellout to not only his constituents but to the rest of Canada. And so yeah, very very frustrating. I've talked about Bill Blair on so many different videos, and I just want to remind people, because there's a possibility that he is going to be shifted or shuffled out of cabinet. This guy should be in jail. This guy should be charged. This guy should be, full extent of the law for things that he has done. And he gets instead a really cushy job, and he's probably going to, again, even if he resigns, he's probably going to get some like, another cushy job, or like these speaking conventions where he can spend thousands or charge thousands of dollars for people to attend. And it's just ridiculous. And again, I'll reiterate, he should be in jail for his involvement in so many different corrupted things that have happened. But I just wanted to read this. I sent this on my social media. But in February of 2022, Bill Blair served as president of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada and Minister of Emergency Preparedness. I talked about this at the time and how that was very concerning because of him being the chief of police in Toronto during that summit, where, again, people look at that, I think it was in 2010 or 2014. He had assumed these roles following the October 2021 cabinet shuffle and held them until a subsequent shuffle in July 2023, when he became Minister of National Defense. During this period, Bill Blair played a key role in the federal response to the Canada Convoy protest, including the invocation of the Emergency Act in February of 2022. I said this at the time. I've said it since. I've shared footage of the Emergency Act hearings that were going on, etc. And Bill Blair, again, this guy should be investigated. He should be arrested. And again, a key player in the Emergency Act being declared, and that was considered to be unlawful and unconstitutional. Unlawful, unconstitutional. And how is he not in jail when you had people like Jeremy McKenzie and Tamara Lich and Chris Babar and my goodness, Pat King and others, Helen Bruce, so many people either kicked out of their jobs or jailed, charged in the courts, spending over $100,000 in fees And again, just people that were exposing the truth and being peaceful and respectful, and targeted people's bank accounts frozen, etc. And again, because of people, not even because of people like Bill Blair, because of Bill Blair and others like Marco Mancino and these other clowns. Anyway, I'm going on these tangents, but I'm going to share my social media because people are still claiming that there are no such thing as paid protesters. And so this is from Blaze Media, and calls it out. I've shared also with Moose on the Loose and others, Nate Friedman's account on social media, because his whole account is all about exposing paid protesters over the years and how many different organizations and movements they circle through. And yeah, these people need to get a job, to get a life, respectfully speaking.
If this movement is truly against billionaires and the powerful, why is it funded by billionaires and the powerful? This is not about dismantling power. This is about rearranging power. So according to several sources, including Fox News, George Soros and his Open Society Action Fund granted $3 million to Indivisible. Now, this is one of the primary organizers of the No Kings protest. Soros's larger network, the Open Society Foundation, gave over $7.6 million to the same operation. We're almost at $11 million, but Soros is not alone. If you follow the funding trail, it leads to, what a surprise, the Arabella Network. Now you add in the Bill Gates Foundation, or the Ford Foundation, or here's my favorite, the Rockefeller Network. There is now this organization funded by billionaires, Riots Inc., and it is the permanent protest industrial complex. These tactics were developed by the CIA, and they're called color revolutions. And what they do is they flood the streets with, quote, organic protesters. They control the media narrative. They destabilize the existing system, and then they overthrow that system and install a new one. It is part of a longer game. Once you convince free people that freedom itself is the problem, they'll beg for a change. And that's when the king.
Blaze TV. I thought it was on this whiteboard, but it was actually the whiteboard before this. So the whiteboard that I did in the end of December, early January. I think it was early January of 2022, because I knew the Freedom Convoy was coming. And again, you could see that whiteboard when I posted it and when I talked about it. And I had mentioned these philanthropy companies or organizations that he literally just mentioned now. And he's saying, oh, this is just happening. This is something that I posted literally 4 years ago. Almost to the date, because it was early January, it was probably before this. 4 years ago, I literally, and again, I'm going to share it. I should have showed, because I gave photos of my whiteboards, my older ones, just to show what I was doing before I started going more vocal and doxed myself. And I was like, okay, here's my assessments. I've been trying to share this information with people within my networks, highest levels of government internationally. They're not listening. And in fact, this is making my life really hard and destroyed my career and all this stuff and made me a target. But I literally wrote this down about the Open Society, Bill Gates, the the Rockefeller Foundations, the Ford Foundation, we for Canada, and literally on that whiteboard. And I'm glad finally it took 4 freaking years, 4 years of literally all the freaking time calling this stuff out publicly, and it's finally getting mainstream. And he's naming the right ones too, which is so satisfying to hear. Anyway,
the real kings step out from. If this movement is truly against billionaires and the powerful, why is it funded by billionaires and the powerful? This is not about dismantling power. This is about rearranging power. So according to several sources, including Fox News, George Soros and his Open Society Action Fund granted $3 million to Indivisible. Now, this is one of the primary organizers of the No Kings protest. If this movement...
So yeah, there's more. So much more. Pope Leo. Leo, ruled by the sun, connected to the 7th chakra. Sunday. Sun's day. Gold or violet for the colors. And anyway. Interesting name.
Pope Leo has condemned Orwellian free speech restrictions in the West.
It's painful to see how, especially in the West, the space for genuine freedom of expression is rapidly shrinking. At the same time, a new Orwellian-style language is developing, which, in an attempt to be increasingly inclusive, ends up excluding those who do not conform to the ideologies that are fueling it.
That's my American Pope. Pope Leo has condemned.
Yeah, I've done a bit of research into him. It's been a long time. I do recall that there might have been the possibility of him involved with some kind of involvement with people within the Christian community, committing heinous acts on children or a child. And I got to get more information on that. But not being involved in anything himself. There's no allegations. There's nothing like that regarding him himself. In fact, there's actually a lot of positive comments and feedback and commentary that are made regarding this pope. I wasn't familiar with him until he got selected to be, the pope. But apparently he was very well known within his community as doing a lot of good work, and so that would be very interesting, and more to follow on that. But he's talking about Canada in there. Obviously, other countries as well. But our censorship is wild, and there were even people threatening to. First of all, they're censoring the Bible, which is heinous to me, but also censoring the X platform because it's less biased now, and people on the left don't like that. They don't like unbiased reporting. This is tragic. So Iran tomorrow is set to execute Irfan Soltani, protester arrested in the 2026 uprising. And he was arrested on the 8th of January. And the reason why the Islamic Republic is set to execute him this Wednesday, again tomorrow, and informed his family that the sentence is final. He was denied access to a lawyer. Irfan's only crime was calling for freedom, be his voice. And he was charged under something where it was like against God, and I totally forget it again. I'm running on really not a lot of sleep here, but this was a religiously motivated decision, and I really hope something can be done with the U.S. getting involved and some kind of asylum. See, these are the cases where it's necessary, not people coming here to exploit us for a grift and fraud, respectfully speaking. If people can peacefully form a movement to address issues with corruption and dictatorships within their own country, resolve it and manage it themselves, and end up being able to democratically elect new leaders in key positions, then this is the best way forward, right? And I'm hoping that people can see that as an example, and again be more emboldened to take action, but again in a peaceful way. It has to be. And it's just a shame that there are people that are getting paid within government to go after people within government that are corrupted and or again committing war crimes or crimes against humanity, especially on their own people, and destabilizing from within. And they're not doing their jobs that they're paid for, and it's unfortunate that it's getting worse and worse and worse to the point where a lot more people are getting more what they call radicalized, or I would say desperate, when they see their countries falling and so oppressed, and seeing the people at the top within government getting so much money and power out of this, while again they're faltering. It's just incredibly interesting. Is all I'll say about that. So I think that's all for Instagram. I do want to get into X. So should I apply to be part of the next debate? I mean, they might not even choose me. It's the likelihood that they wouldn't, at least for this batch around. But what's this? Okay, I'm gonna follow myself. Hey, I've shared this before, but again, just because we're talking about the Freedom Convoy, I might as well let it play out again. Churchgoers, loving. They basically created the fear. She said that had she not been working that first weekend of the Freedom Convoy and seen how peaceful they were, a lot of Christians out calling like love, feeding the homeless, cleaning the streets, all of this stuff. The people that were causing the chaos were agitators. They were paid role players, crisis actors, and they were paid protesters. Okay, that are part of like the same protests that they do in the U.S. They travel all over the friggin' place, and it's BLM, it's Antifa, it's abortions, it's this, it's the same friggin' groups, the pro-Palestine, and and they were cutting brake lines, and they were breaking windows, and they were harassing people, and they were had open alcohol, and they were pretending to be drunk, yeah, even though like they were before they got to their scenario where they were in more major areas. I see this for myself. They got out of a vehicle, they were laughing and stuff like that, walking straight. As soon as they get closer to people, then they start stumbling and acting a mess and stuff like that. And I literally shared a story of it, and I'm saying that these are likely paid protesters or crisis actors or role players. Again, there's different um, areas to get people from, and that's just so they're not connected. And I've talked about Brian Fox, allegedly the one that was wearing the balaclava and the that friggin' Nazi flag or whatever it was. And again, he it was for photo ops for Justin Trudeau to make it look like this was some kind of a crazy right wing, neo-Nazi, misogynist, sexist, pseudo-scientific group of people, and that was not even close to reality. And people in the businesses downtown, again, media like CBC and Global News and all these clowns were lying to people, trying to induce fear by Sunday, and then politicians, and this is witness accounts from people there, and saying, do not go to university, don't go to your classes. Wild. But they'll allow people to break windows, damage infrastructure within universities all over Canada. And again, this is what I mean. It's a two-tier justice system at this point in time, unfortunately, and it really depends on what side of the political ideological spectrum you fall on as to what kind of a response there will be imposed by our politicians. Carney just threw out a ridiculous tweet on carbon emissions, all this stuff, and of course he was wrong and biased, and so I did this assessment up, and I posted it. This was on LinkedIn. I already shared this to people on Rumble, so this was the 12th of January. So check out my latest article, Canada's Net Zero Problem, Punishing Producers, Feeding Bureaucracy. And I highly recommend, if you haven't seen that, to take a look. And I might have shared this before, but I'm going to share it again.
HSI. Let me make this clear. Federal agents, ICE, HSI, are officers. They are agents of law enforcement. If you box them in with vehicles, it is reasonable for them to believe that they are being ambushed and that this could end in a deadly situation. And it's reasonable for them to use force based on those conditions. Do not box in any law enforcement officer. You are breaking the law when you do that. And you are putting yourself in danger. Following law enforcement agents around. The question is why? What do you plan on doing? It's also reasonable for them to believe that you're eventually going to do harm to them. If you ram any vehicle, especially that one that contains law enforcement agents, and that's any law enforcement, local, state, federal, county, and you do this intentionally, this is considered deadly force. Deadly force is anything that can cause great bodily harm or death. When you plow into a vehicle that contains law enforcement agents, you're using deadly force. And they can use deadly force in response to stop you. We need to be clear about these laws. We cannot become a society where we just decide to take everything in our own hands and start to commit crimes against law enforcement. It is a crime. You may not like what they're doing. I can understand that there's a lot of emotions out there, but that does not mean that you get to commit a crime, especially one that could lead to deadly force. We need to keep everyone safe. Our responsibilities when it comes to federal agents, and I've been asked these questions, we do not interfere with the duties and responsibilities of federal agents.
Well said. And there are people that are saying that because he had been involved with attempting to detain an illegal immigrant with a terrible rap sheet, and then being trapped and being dragged for 300 feet and having to have 33 stitches, etc. People think that he had PTSD and should have been in the field. Ridiculous comments, respectfully speaking. Possibly something, yeah, that we can like consider looking into, like his all of that stuff. Of course, look into his mental health, looking into see if there was any issues that have happened post traumatic event that he experienced in, I think it was June or July of last year, and see if that has impacted him and where he has become like more of a there's been reports against him since. And but I will say that these are things that law enforcement, that military, that paramedics, that doctors, etc., experience on a fairly regular basis, and or have experienced like multiple traumatic events and experiences where people's lives have been lost, and yeah, and it's part of the job. It is part of the job, which is why there needs to be more training, more education, not this woke DEI stuff, respectfully speaking, but actually to make us like more of a professional force. And but yeah, to say that just because like there's been like difficult experiences in the past, so they shouldn't be able to work it again. You'd have to literally fire every single person anytime that they've experienced or been exposed to any kind of type of traumatic experience. You know, just because of the risk of them, I don't know, possibly like losing it is what they would possibly claim when responding to similar events. And as someone who, again, had served, I was an infantry officer. I served for 15 years, over 15 years, or about 15 years. And then immediately, as soon as I got out, I incorporated, and I was working right away and have been since. Although, again, the work that I've done unpaid for the last couple of years, because there's just, again, there's not the appetite or the flavor for people to listen to what I'm saying or look at what I'm sharing, because it goes against the common narrative right now in Canada. And it's frustrating because the people I'm communicating with in the network are people that are upper middle class or people that have incredible resumes on paper, and so they're being hired and or have been hired and very successful in their careers. And again, I'm not hating on them at all. Like it's great. But some of these people, again, are, again, like they're involved with intelligence, with security and defense at home and abroad, and they're sharing information that is completely incorrect and has been for many years. They're getting it wrong consistently, and these, again, are the people that I'm up against. And again, their resumes, when you look at it on paper, are much better than mine. But if you look at what they're sharing and have been sharing for years, I'm hoping at some point people consider that, maybe looking at other people, especially the whistleblowers, and hiring them for their expertise because we were right. Okay, so just examples for people. Breaking Ice has provided Fox News a list of the most egregious criminal aliens they've arrested during their surge in the sanctuary state of Minnesota, and it is the most disturbing list I've ever seen, including numerous convicted child rapists, sodomizers, and 10 convicted killers, most with the deportation orders going back many years, several from Laos, Somalia, and Sudan. Warning, graphic highlights below. So it gives a breakdown of, again, just examples of some of the people they had arrested. Disgusting rap sheets, if this is confirmed. And this was on the 10th of January is when it was posted. And again, this is a few days later, so no doubt more people getting arrested. And this needed to be an immediate response. So the fact that there were protesters that were blocking ICE from gathering evidence that could have possibly been destroyed, because they were doing that even within the days after they were exposed for fraud in the for the daycares, like the Leering Center, for example, and claiming that people broke in and took all, like evidence that we needed, like nominal rolls and manifests and lists of children and financial data, etc., like magically disappeared. And that's why it had to be a quick response. So the longer you stall, you morons, respectfully speaking, the more you are making it where people that are actual criminals that is stealing your taxpayer monies, and a lot of them involved in drug trafficking, human trafficking, or have committed crimes. So not only illegal, but have literally made your areas dangerous, and they're grifting. And you guys want them to again be free? Like I don't get it. Like I really don't understand. You've got Iranian women who are literally risking their lives, and people have died, and it got crazy. But it's a violent regime, and there's a lot of oppression, right? And so Canada can't compare to that, obviously, but women actually risking their lives even by not wearing the headdress, and then we have people in Canada and in the U.S. that are against these women. It's just free Maduro. Free the illegal aliens that are sodomizing children. Okay. Anyways, before I get into... Yes, okay, I guess that could be it for X. I have tabs. Okay. Oh, yeah, and speaking of rap sheets, there was the alleged Renee Nicole Good. Apparently, she had committed like a lot of crimes. Like, I don't know if people have seen this. I didn't post this because, again, I wanted to look into it first. And so I looked at it. And so right away, I see that it says aged 44, even though they were reporting that she was 37 years old. So already before I even looked at the rap sheet, I looked at that, right? Nicole Renee Good. Is it the right name? Is it spelled correctly? Because again, there could be people with this very similar names that are being misattributed to this specific Nicole Renee Good or Renee Nicole Good. I don't know. But anyway, saying that the alleged date of birth is October 7th of 1980, which would make her 45 years old, 46 this year. And but she was in fact born, I believe it was on the 2nd of April of 1988, which aligns with that. And so different birth dates already makes me question this. And then if you look at it, again, it's a bad rap sheet where there's domestic abuse, child endangerment, state probation violation, more of them state probation violations, interfering with medical treatment, battery of a police officer, entering remaining real property. So, but again, this is hugely defaming of a woman that just died and who had a family, and so I don't know or think that this specific rap sheet is real, only because again, like just the birthday alone. And so if anyone has any actual real proof, then send it to me, don189@protonmail.com, or send it on my Instagram DMs. You have to type my full name out, or you don't even get to see my profile. Right to the last letter, I'm told, and then you get a warning if you want to follow me or not, which is sort of hilarious. Anyway, so this is again is my LinkedIn profile. round three. Oh, and I have premium services, and it's so expensive, and and it increased again. So it was like 40, or I remember it when I first got it was like $25 a month, which was already insane. And then it went to 35 and then 45. And that was just a few years ago. It was like $45 a month. Now it's $75 a month plus tax for premium. Disgusting. And again, that is crazy to me. And that has only increased in the last, I would say, like 2-3 years. And correct me if I'm wrong, but wild. And also censored. And if you know who owns it, or created it. So this is something that I was working on, and wanted to share it. It's making me open it up in Adobe. Okay. Maybe I'll just show it on Word instead of LinkedIn. Easier that way. Okay. So, strategic intelligence assessment, the alliance hierarchy. Subject, comparative audit of Canada versus Israel as strategic assets to the United States. The only reason why I even decided to even do this up, and again, I obviously had help with that with AI. But again, it was a long process because there was it was very particularly things that I wanted to add and mention. And so there was just like so many different versions and editing and paragraphs to reword and things like that. But what was it? Oh, it's not even up anymore. But it was the worldwide debate, and the guy that ended up winning, and he was a great debater. But the guy that ended up winning, I was watching, like, not the whole thing again, and there were so many points that I wanted to be on the stage to refute, and respectfully, giving him a Canadian perspective, as someone who, again, who has been to war with the U.S. and has done so much work with the U.S. And so I took offense to a little offense to what he was saying, propping up Israel as much as he was at the expense of the U.S. and again their other allies. And so, anyways, I'm just going to read this. So I have to go back. So if there's anyone that's going to be talking about anything or comments, I won't see it until I finish. Okay, so this is open source. I didn't put any classification on it, obviously. Executive summary. This assessment challenges the prevailing geopolitical orthodoxy regarding the United States alliance structure. While political discourse frequently elevates the U.S. Israel partnerships to a position of primacy, a structural audit reveals a stark divergence in strategic utility. Israel functions as a regional client state, highly capable but geographically constrained, financially dependent, and operationally distinct from U.S. command structures. Canada functions as a civilizational peer, a continental guarantor, an international expeditionary partner, and a foundational architect of the Western intelligence apparatus. The data indicates that while the U.S. invests billions annually to sustain Israel's regional defense, Canada provides existential security to the U.S. homeland and international intelligence reach at zero direct cost to the American taxpayer. Intelligence integration, the Five Eyes architecture. The distinction between a partner and an ally is most visible in the intelligence domain. The Five Eyes distinction, Canada, Tier 1 member, and again, I will reiterate, I was part of the Five Eyes community. I was 2IC of a squadron at JTF2. And I don't say a lot of what I did or anything like that because I've signed non-disclosures, and some of them are permanent. But so I can speak more to this. And so Canada is a founding member of the Five Eyes Alliance, US, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. This is not a transactional sharing agreement, or sharing arrangement. It is structural integration. The Communications Security Establishment, which is our CSC, acts as a direct extension of the NSA, responsible for monitoring the Arctic, the North Pacific, and vast sectors of the international data spectrum. The U.S. relies on Canadian SIGINT to cover its own blind spots. Israel, third party. Israel is designated as a third party partner. While intelligence sharing is robust, particularly regarding counterterrorism in the Levant, it is transactional. Israel does not have unrestricted access to the Five Eyes raw data pool, nor does it participate in the strategic planning of international surveillance architecture. Israel shares what benefits Israel. Canada shares everything as a matter of treaty. Even with Pegasus and Palantir, with Peter Thiel and Alex Karp or Cross. I keep on forgetting how to say his last name. Karp, I think it is. But anyways, yeah. Strategic implication: a breach in Tel Aviv is a diplomatic crisis. A breach in Ottawa is a catastrophic failure of the U.S. national security perimeter. I'm going to reiterate that. Strategic implications: a breach in Tel Aviv is a diplomatic crisis. A breach in Ottawa is a catastrophic failure to the U.S. national security perimeter. I'll reiterate, because of our location. We are literally connected to the U.S. in so many different ways. Expeditionary warfare and NATO leadership. The test of an alliance is the willingness to project power in defense of the other's interests, not merely one's own borders. NATO and Article 5, the Afghanistan Crucible. Canada, as a founding member of NATO, 1949, Canada was instrumental in creating the transatlantic security architecture. Following 9/11, the only time Article 5 has been invoked, Canada did not merely send support, it deployed a full battle group to Kandahar. And again, not a full battle group, multiple times. We were there, again, from, depending on what organizations we were involved from 2002 up until when we stopped doing combat missions, which was, I believe, 2014, 2012, 2014, around that time. And yeah, and I served from 2001 to 2016. And then post that, I did a lot of other work. Okay, so yeah. Kandahar, the most kinetic theater of the war. Canada sustained 158 combat fatalities fighting a war triggered by an attack on New York City that has been assessed as a deep state false flag involving the Bush family, Larry Silverstein, and Donald Rumsfeld. And I get more into that at the end. And over 2,000 wounded. And we have had a lot of suicides, unfortunately. And we do have a smaller military. In fact, our military now is not even operationally ready or functionable. But even several years ago, we had less people within the entire military than New York Police Department. So Israel is not a NATO member. Due to complex regional geopolitics, Israel did not deploy troops to Afghanistan or Iraq. Its military doctrine is strictly defensive and localized to its immediate borders, despite the fact that it starts shit with a lot of neighboring regions at the expense of the American and Canadian taxpayers. I'll get more into that. Current global posture. Latvia, Operation Reassurance. Canada currently leads the NATO Enhanced Forward Presence, EFP, battle group in Latvia. Canadian officers command multinational forces, including Italians, Spaniards, and Poles, to deter Russian aggression on Europe's eastern flank. People know what I think about what's going on within Europe and Russia, Ukraine. Look at my videos on that as well. I've shared a lot of misinformation. I said from the beginning that we should not be involved in this, respectfully speaking, and I don't care what you think about that. I do think that there has been, anyways, look at my previous videos on that. The Ukrainian government is corrupt, and it has been corrupt for many years. The staged and planned coup of 2014 was just like the icing on the cake. And again, there is absolutely involvement with military intelligence assets and governmental intelligence assets within the U.S. and Canada that are enabling and supporting, again, a lot of propaganda and psychological operations that are again creating more of an escalation and people dying, respectfully speaking, needlessly at this point, when we should have stronger alliances. And in Canada with that as well, our involvement with the EU and what's going on in Ukraine, which doesn't benefit us. And what I mean is it also makes things worse. And the funding that is going towards Ukraine and for more people to die on either side, this could be invested in our Canadian military and infrastructure, which is really outdated, Yeah, we are struggling, and so we're not getting any financial assistance from the U.S. to build our militaries, and we're getting our taxpayers' dollars that should be going invested into our security and defense. It's going towards money laundering and the black market, and a proxy war that only benefits the military pharmaceutical industrial complex. Indo-Pacific, Canada actively deploys frigates, HMC Montreal, Ottawa to the Taiwan Strait, and participates in freedom of navigation operations along the U.S. Navy to check Chinese expansionism. Israel possesses no such blue water power projection capabilities. Sovereignty and the Continental Shield. Historically, Canada's evolution from a British dominion to a sovereign North American power was the decisive factor in U.S. hemispheric security. Okay, we fought wars in Canada in order to have our own sovereignty that was disconnected from the monarchy. I'm going to reiterate that. A lot of wars, a lot of people, even from my own family on both sides, helped. The Monroe Doctrine realized sovereignty as security. By asserting independence from the British Empire, Canada removed the threat of a European imperial power, maintaining a foothold on the U.S. border. This allowed the U.S. to look north and see a partner rather than a colonial outpost. NORAD, the unique command. This sovereignty allowed for the creation of NORAD. Canada is the only nation on earth with whom the U.S. shares bi-national command of its own airspace. In the event of a decapitation strike on Washington, a Canadian general has the authority to command U.S. Air Force assets to defend the continent. This level of existential trust is non-existent with any other nation, including Israel. Fiscal audit, the aid versus alliance disparity. The financial asymmetry between the two relationships highlights the differences between a subsidized partner and a self-sufficient ally. So this is the metric: direct military aid, FMF, for Israel, 3.8 billion a year annually as the base. Canada, 0. War supplementals, approximately 4.5 billion from 2023-2024 alone. They have gotten billions of dollars a year to supplement in so many different categories as well financially. Their military, their defense, their security, anyways, giving our taxpayers to their citizens when we need it. In Canada, record-breaking food shortages, etc. More and more people being forced to default on their mortgages because they've increased significantly, and it's often cases almost by double. Anyway, relationship model, donor, recipient for Israel and the US. For Canada, the relationship model is peer, partner. The Israel model, the US taxpayer effectively underwrites roughly 15 to 20% of the Israelis' defense budget. Just their defense budget. I'm going to say that again. The U.S. taxpayer effectively underwrites roughly 15 to 20% of the Israeli defense budget. Technologies like Iron Dome are joint ventures funded largely by American capital. The Canadian model. Canada receives no U.S. funding. Instead, Canada invests billions in continental defense, over-the-horizon radar, F-35 procurement, effectively subsidizing the early warning system for American cities. Canada pays to protect the U.S. The U.S. pays Israel to protect itself. There's more I can talk about, but conclusion. The strategic ledger is unambiguous. Israel is a vital high-value asset for regional stability in the Middle East and niche technology development. However, its relationship with the United States is characterized by financial dependency and operational autonomy. Canada is an existential partner. It secures the U.S. homeland, integrates deeply into the U.S. intelligence nervous system, and projects combat power internationally in defense of American interests, all while funding its own operations. Verdict. The United States has many allies, but it has only one brother. The friction caused by current political leadership in Ottawa is a temporary administrative issue. The structural reality remains that Canada is the only ally whose survival is synonymous with the survival of the United States itself. And I've talked about where we do need to, I've talked to this government. I've shown emails that I've given to to so many different areas like Alert and Eureka, Yukon, or Newfoundland, etc., where volunteering to even go there and work. And because I'm saying that we need to have more eyes within these areas for multiple different reasons, not only for ourselves, but for the U.S. And it's slowly starting. People are picking up in the last few months, and I've shared videos on that saying, good, it's better late than never, but we need money for that. Anyways, addendum, the leadership variance and operational risk. Classification, domestic political risk assessment. Because I talk about Canada, but I know right now that we are eroding our relationship with the U.S. more and more, and losing credibility. And this, they are looking at. Anyways, I'm going to get into this first. So, while the structural alliance between Canada and the United States remains an existential necessity, it is currently facing a crisis of confidence due to the ideological orientation of the incumbent administration in Ottawa. Intelligence assessments indicate that the current government's pivot towards post-national socialist frameworks has fractured the traditional cohesion of the alliance. The competence crisis, DEI versus merit. The primary friction point is the perceived abandonment of meritocratic leadership selection in favor of ideological compliance and diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI quotas. This has resulted in the elevation of individuals to key security and defense portfolios who lack the traditional operational pedigree expected by Five Eyes partners. I've talked about people like Anita Anand and Melanie Jolie, etc., but now I'm getting into people that are actually leading key organizations. Defense and security leadership. The appointments of figures such as Brenda Lucki, former RCMP commissioner, and General Jenny Carignan, chief of the defense staff currently, are frequently cited by critics as prioritizing social engineering mandates over raw command lethality and institutional discipline. Civilian governance. High-level officials, including Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, and Dr. Theresa Tam, are viewed by U.S. counterparts as favoring internationalist NGOs like the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization over continental security integration. This has created a diplomatic backlog where Canada is increasingly seen as an unserious partner in hard power discussions. And look at the relationships with Trump and Carney. Like, Carney's getting walked all over whenever he has any meetings with Trump. The consequence, ally drift. Because these leadership nodes prioritize domestic social signaling over defense spending and combat readiness, Canada is being progressively marginalized within its own alliance structures. Five Eyes exclusion. There are growing indicators that the US and UK are developing workarounds to bypass Canadian ineptitude, effectively forming a Three Eyes, UK, US, Australian inner circle. And they're going to call it AUKUS. That excludes Ottawa, Canada, due to fears of operational leakage or lack of capability. Embarrassing. When we have so many people that I can even just name up from the top of my head that are ready to work even now, that are getting stopped because of these clowns that I just named. Anyway. The verdict, the structural brotherhood remains, but the current leadership class is viewed as a temporary liability. The return to a strong Canada-US partnership is contingent upon Ottawa returning to a merit-based, security-first governance model. And then provide a link why Canada's army is breaking. So it's a critical analysis of the current state of the Canadian Armed Forces, detailing how recruitment failures and leadership decisions have degraded operational readiness. And that's not even current. It's gotten worse. And I talked about 9/11 and stuff like that too. So I did want to talk about, I've talked about a lot of other things, but I also want to talk about trust. So executive summary. This dossier expands on the fiscal and operational disparities between the United States' relationships with Canada and Israel. Beyond the economic imbalance, a historical audit reveals a divergence in intelligence integrity. While Canada has consistently provided blood and treasure in conflicts triggered by attacks on the U.S. homeland, example Afghanistan, the historical record indicates that intelligence originating from or championed by the Israeli state apparatus has frequently precipitated U.S. involvement in conflicts based on demonstrably false premises. Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, so many different areas. But again, we can't lump every single action that's taken in certain countries to remove dictators and say that they're all going to result in the same outcomes, because I provided examples where there was stability and democracy that did replace dictatorships, whether it be on the far left or the far right. And and it's on LinkedIn as well if you want to look at that. But I also did a video on that not too long ago. Report integrates forensic assessments of the Iraq War pretext and controversial inquiries regarding the origins of the global war on terrorism, the GWOT. The Canadian sacrifice, the price of loyalty. When the United States invoked NATO's Article 5 following the event of September 11th, 2001, Canada did not offer conditional support. It deployed combat forces to the most kinetic theaters of the war. The deployment. Canada, and I can confirm that for a fact, because again, I've been there and I know multiple people that have been there on multiple different rotations, and the areas that they were working in and operating in, again, very austere in a lot of cases, very remote and very dangerous. Very dangerous. The deployment. Canada assumed responsibility for Kandahar province, the spiritual home of the Taliban and the most violent sector of Afghanistan. The cost. Canada sustained 158 combat fatalities and over 2,000 wounded. And again, and people that have, a lot of people that have committed suicide, unfortunately, over their experiences. The context. These Canadian soldiers died fighting a war triggered by an attack on New York City, a city Canada pays to defend via NORAD. This sacrifice was made without Canada having any role in the geopolitical machinations of that preceded the conflict. Intelligence, integrity, the Iraq pretext. In contrast to Canada's military sacrifice, the Israeli contribution to the U.S. war on terror frequently involved the provision of intelligence that entangled the United States in conflicts that did not serve American interests. The Netanyahu testimony, September 12, 2002. While Canada was deploying troops to fight al-Qaeda, Benjamin Netanyahu, then former prime minister, now current prime minister who should be in jail, but anyway, appeared before the U.S. Congress to actively lobby for a U.S. invasion of Iraq. His testimony is now historically verified as a primary driver of the false WMD narrative, weapons of mass destruction. The guarantee. Netanyahu testified under oath. There is no question whatsoever that Saddam is seeking, is working, is advancing towards the development of nuclear weapons. The promise. He further stated, if you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. The result, no WMDs were found. The invasion destabilized the region, empowered Iran, and cost the U.S. trillions of dollars. Canada notably refused to join the invasion of Iraq under Prime Minister Jacques Chrétien due to the lack of credible evidence, a decision vindicated by history. We did eventually get involved, obviously, because again, we're brothers in arms, essentially. We do a lot of work in operations with the U.S., and so we eventually did go, but at first there was no proof, and Jacques Chrétien did do the right decision. The false witness network. So again, the U.S., you should have listened to Jacques Chrétien, respectfully speaking, and the proof that he had, and why. But instead you listen to Netanyahu, and he's being propped up by some kind of a goddamn hero, respectfully speaking. Sorry for taking the Lord's name in vain. And we just keep on falling for the same old. The false witness network. The road to war was paved by fabricated human intelligence, promoted by actors aligned with regional intervention. Curveball. Rafid Ahmad Alwan al-Janabi, an Iraqi defector whose fabrications about mobile biological weapons labs became the centerpiece of Secretary of State Colin Powell's UN presentation. The INC connection. Ahmed Shalabi and the Iraqi National Congress, INC, who were heavily lobbied by neoconservative factions in Washington, funneled false defectors to U.S. intelligence agencies to manufacture a pretext for war. Same thing in Ukraine. That's what I'm talking about. Same thing with what's going on even now. Forensic reassessments, the origins of the war. A growing body of independent intelligence analysis and forensic engineering now challenge the official narrative regarding the catalyst of the war on terror, the events of September 11, 2001. and look at videos I've done over the years. Just do a search on in my content. Just put in 9/11 or September 11th. You're going to see so many different videos that refute the NIST report. Structural and financial anomalies. Deep state assessment. Independent researchers and architects have compiled evidence suggesting that the collapse of the World Trade Center complex, including World Trade Center Building 7, exhibited characteristics consistent with controlled demolitions rather than asymmetrical structural failure due to fire. The Silverstein-Rumsfeld nexus. Critics point to the lease transfer of the WTC complex to Larry Silverstein mere months before the attacks, including a specialized terrorism insurance policy and the simultaneous announcement by Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld on the 10th of September 2001 regarding 2.3 trillion in missing Pentagon transactions. And these have been confirmed. I've talked about so many other people, like I think his name is Marvin Bush, but anyways, George Bush's brother, who was part of Securicom and had been working within the Twin Towers, and possibly again are the ones that put these controlled demolitions, these explosive devices, into the areas, possibly months, weeks leading up to this attack. I've talked about Bush and his connections to Saudi Arabia, including royalty and oil tycoons, etc., and how he assisted in getting people that were connected to the this event, allowing them to flee the country, using their government assets as well to assist with that, instead of being investigated, etc. And how I believe it was 15 out of the 19 alleged hijackers or suspected hijackers were Saudi Arabian. And so looking at that rabbit hole, I've talked about Israel and it's the importance of Israel in the Middle East. I did forget to mention that there are other options to get intel on the Middle East. It's not critical at this point that it just becomes from Israel, respectfully speaking, because again, a lot of this information we're getting from the U.S. and Canadians involved in other areas, multiple different organizations and agencies, and we can still get information from other Middle Eastern countries. I've talked about Jordan would be a good example, the UAE to varying degrees. I would be a little bit suspect with Qatar because, again, they are much more known for supporting and funding terrorist organizations within the Middle East. But again, it's Canada and the US and other people that are in Israel, but again, it's American money, that are funneling the money to Qatar into certain networks. And then that money is going towards, again, radicalization and destabilizing regions. And again, to keep these perpetual wars going, because there's a lot of money in it. And it keeps us distracted and divided, and it kills a lot of people, unfortunately. And I would like that, less Ukrainians to die, less Russians to die. I would love it if there was some kind of an alliance and that they work together. They're very similar regarding their ideologies and their cultures and their religions and the background and the lineage and the genealogy, etc. So, come on. We're already the minority, white people, respectfully speaking, too. And I want to say that because, again, there are people that are doing targeted attacks against white people. And I do believe that there's a possibility that this is also, again, to kill as many white people as possible, like they're doing in other ways as well, with MAID, with drug overdoses, with, my God, so many different things. Where was I going with this? All right, I'll go back to the reading of this. Operation Northwoods Parallel. I talked about Northwoods as well for years. Analysts often cite the declassified Operation Northwoods documents, 1962, which proposed U.S. government orchestrated false flag terror attacks to justify war as a historical precedent for the deep state capability to manufacture consent for conflict. Strategic implications. If these assessments hold, that the war was triggered by a domestic transnational intelligence operation rather than a foreign non-state actor, then Canada's loss of 158 soldiers, including people that I loved, worked with, knew personally, okay, in that group of people, because again, I was in the combat arms, I was an infantry officer with the Patricias, 2001 to 2016, and I've talked about these brave, heroic, incredible people that again lost their lives, and many people that I know that are alive, double amputees, triple amputees, destabilizing injuries, Anyways, but it becomes an even more profound betrayal. Do people understand why Canada, people like myself and countless others are trying to just have conversations? This has nothing to do with anti-Semitism or anything. We're talking about rogue criminal actors that are working within Israel and in the US and other areas as well, in Canada, like, again, whatever. But people like Netanyahu, these are criminals. And because of their lies, people that I know personally have been killed. And yeah. And we get reminded of it every single Remembrance Day and every single September 11th. Strategic implication. If these assessments hold that the war was triggered by a domestic transnational intelligence operation rather than a foreign non-state actor, okay, then Canada's, I already said this, but I'll say it again, then Canada's loss of 158 soldiers becomes an even more profound betrayal, and over 2,000 injured, and many suicides. Again, people I know personally or knew personally. And in fact, even in the special forces, this is happening. I don't know how much I can say, but even recently in the last month, a young man, 25 years old, killed himself. Very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. It implies that Canada's most loyal sons and daughters were sacrificed in a conflict engineered by a nexus of U.S. and foreign intelligence interests. Conclusion: the alliance equity verdict. The contrast between the two allies is stark. Canada, a truthful ally, not anymore, again, respectfully speaking, not with Carney, but again, this is just, it's short term. Again, if they can resign and we can get actual people that are hired for the positions based on merit, this could be turned around. It's going to take a few years, but better late than never. Anyway, a truthful ally, Canada secured the U.S. homeland, NORAD, fought in Afghanistan and Iraq and Ukraine, and they're assisting with these in Israel as well. Like so again, it's not even. It's just there's so much. Even anyways. Correctly identified the Iraq WMD narrative as false and refused to participate originally. Canada pays for its own defense and bleeds for U.S. security. Israel, a risk multiplier. The Israeli leadership, specifically Netanyahu and people like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, and these people are criminals. And the people within the USA that are funding and supporting and enabling these lies, you do not care about your military or anyone else's goddamn, like the Canadian military, your allies, clearly. Sitting in your boardroom or your friggin' desk. Yeah. Not the ones on the ground. Okay, so actively utilized U.S. legislative channels to promote false intelligence, WMDs, for example, and so much more, that drew the U.S. into a disastrous war. Look what's going on even now. Disastrous. Look at the pullout. Disastrous. Strategic recommendation. The United States must pivot its reliance towards Canada, the ally that protects the continental homeland and fights with integrity, and reassess the cost of its reliance on intelligence partners whose geopolitical survival depends on entangling the American military in regional wars. Policy directive. Prioritize North American energy and security sovereignty, nuclear, LNG, NORAD, over foreign entanglements driven by third-party intelligence. Canada remains a significant, indispensable partner for the survival of the United States in the short, medium, and long term. And so, yeah, this is why we need to be more cooperative. Unfortunately, it's just a reality. We need to have someone like our prime minister needs to have a strong partnership with Trump, whether you like it or not. And so I spoke a lot. There were so many other things I wrote, op-eds and stuff like that. Let me see here. Look at my post to see if there's anything else. I don't know if I talked to people about the climate scam, but I did do an article on it. Let me see when I wrote this. The 12th. Yeah, so I probably did talk about it. But this, I'll show you the article I wrote on LinkedIn. And I did tag Mark Carney, his response to net zero. And hopefully that at some point can gain traction, but I'm so friggin' censored. And so Canada's net zero problem punishing producers, feeding bureaucracy. And I will reiterate, you cannot run a country like a boardroom, like a business. You can't. Can you run a family like that? No? Okay. Well, you have to factor in so many different things when you are leading a country. And yeah, on that note, I will leave it at, actually, no, I won't leave it at that. Okay, so if there's a worldwide debate that's coming up in the next few months again, does anyone have any recommended topics that they would like me to argue if I was given that chance or that opportunity? And if so, who would you want me to debate also? So who would you want me to debate as part of the lineup, and what would you want us to debate? What topic, what event? And so please let me know in the comments, like, share, and subscribe, all that stuff. And that might make it where there's more of an opportunity for me to get on that stage. And if you like what I share for the most part, and you think that I would be strong in a certain topic that you are very passionate about, then this could be a motivator. If you want me to be the one that argues it, again, you got to let people know. And so now on that note, I will leave it at that. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.